Hello everyone, Vic here with another video. Today we're talking the top 5 John Carpenter films. As you may know or may not know, I'm a huge John Carpenter fan. I met him earlier this year at a horror convention, got to get his autograph, take a picture with him, seemed like a super cool dude. And I've been a fan of his since I started watching movies. I mean, you think about the original Halloween, you think about vampires, you think about Ghost of Mars. I know I'm naming his lesser films, but today we're talking the top 5 John Carpenter films. One day I may do a bigger list ranking all his films, but if you haven't started your John Carpenter journey, I just wanted to give you, in my opinion, the top 5 that you need to basically go watch immediately. You need to turn this video off. Well, here are the top 5 first, and then immediately marathon these 5 films if you haven't watched them. Eventually, you'll want to see all of John Carpenter's films, but I'm going to give you a good starting point if you want to get into it. Of course, one of these movies I'm sure all of you as horror fans have seen, and I'm assuming at least a couple of them you have seen as huge horror fans because they're certified horror classics. But let's go to number 5 on my top 5 John Carpenter films. This one's actually not horror. It's funny that John Carpenter is very much known as a horror director, and him and Wes Craven both get that label as probably two of maybe the two best horror directors of all time, and I understand it completely because most of their filmography is based in horror. Now, John himself, I feel like if I look at his filmography and the things he grew up on, and just from his biography, he used to love westerns. He grew up loving Howard Hawks. No, Howard Hughes. Might be Howard Hughes. Either Howard Hughes or Howard Hawks was his favorite director growing up. But if you look at their filmographies, it's clear at certain points in their careers they didn't want to venture out and do things outside of horror. There's a couple of dramas in there and a couple other things. But Carpenter's very, very interesting in terms of his career arc and his filmography because it's definitely not all horror. You think about Escape from New York, you think of Escape from LA, Ghost of Mars, Starman, which is full-blown romantic drama, I would say, in Starman, which is a very solid movie. So not always sticking to horror, just that horror was sort of paying the bills. It feels like once you make a classic horror film, it might probably be difficult to get outside that box because the studios are like, hey, we know you're good at horror, so give us more horror. We're going to give you money, finance you as a director to make a horror film to make profit for us. It's hard for the horror director to be like, listen, I want to go do this romantic comedy over here. And it's like, well, okay, why don't you do 3 more horror films and then come back and talk to us about the romantic comedy? It seems like that might be the plight for the horror director who is sort of stuck in the horror box. But for Carpenter, I would say that when he did venture out of horror, it was always very interesting and usually resulted in good things. And my number 5 on my top 5 Carpenter films is none other than Big Trouble in Little China. Wow. So many good memories from this film. This is one of those movies that you watch it and you can't help but think, damn it, man, why wasn't there a franchise? Why wasn't there a sequel? You could have followed Jack Burton, played by Kurt Russell. Classic, iconic, would be the hero, but is actually the sidekick character. You could have followed the adventures of Jack Burton all throughout the country. Him and his rig, his truck, could have went to different towns and went on adventures. He's just a very cool, funny, cocky character. But the movie's doing a lot that I think would come to inspire things that came after that. The character of Raiden from Mortal Kombat definitely came from this movie, in my opinion. There's a lot of celebration of, sort of different fighting styles, different filmmaking styles. It's kind of like, it's very interesting to see Carpenter do this. Like, nothing in his previous filmography suggested that he'd be into this kind of stuff, but it comes out very, very well, and you get a really fun comedic action adventure film, I would say. The characters, the actors definitely lead into the comedy. There's a lot of one-liners. Mostly the movie's about putting Jack Burton in new situations and him reacting. Like him just being like, what the hell? Explain this to me. I don't know what this is. But despite not knowing what's going on, Jack Burton's always down for the team, always jumping into the adventure, like whatever's next to help his friend and to get him out of this mess and to get his life back to normal. So you have a great main character, an amazing supporting cast, great set pieces, good fight scenes. We did a deep dive on this movie maybe about 6 months ago, so that's in the archives. But Big Trouble in Little China is one of those great Sunday afternoon matinee type films. Get some popcorn, close the blinds. A rainy day, not rainy day. It's just a fun movie to watch. So top 5 on my Carpenter list, mainly also for the rewatchability. This is a movie that you can revisit time and time again and always have fun with. All right, let's head to number 4 on the list. And for me, this means I'm going to have to put on the glasses. No! Put on the glasses. No! I'm talking about, of course, that epic 12-minute, is it 12 minutes, 9 minutes, 8 minutes? These different reports. I never actually clocked it, but that epic fight scene in They Live with Roddy Piper and Keith David. Man, I rented They Live on video back in the day, way back in the day as a teenager. Rented They Live, watched it, and was obsessed with that movie for the whole 2 days that I had it. I watched it about 5 times. I don't know, man. The opening scene of just that Carpenter score hitting, and then you see the character Nod, I played by Roddy Piper, just strolling through a town with a backpack on, looking for work, going to different banks, being turned down, and then being amongst the homeless, interacting with the homeless, and getting a feel for poverty back then. And Carpenter, of course, was is a very political person, so he's making a political statement back then about the sort of the class warfare, the difference with the rich and how the poor were living, and all that stuff is there in the movie, but of course, everybody knows the memes, the things that come from this movie, the eat, sleep, obey, the sunglasses, the fight scene. There's a lot of things there, a lot of political commentary, but don't get it twisted. The movie is just a fun movie as well. So it's paced very interesting because the first half of the movie, I would say, it really sucks you into the world, really takes its time. This is not a movie for like the super TikTok audience. I'm talking about people that are on TikTok so much that their attention spans are slowly dwindling down to whatever. This movie takes a certain focus in the first half because it's not beating you over the head with action. It's really beating you over the head with like a slow pace, slow simmer of building up. And then in the second half, the movie goes balls to the wall. Once Nada gets in on the play on the plan, once he has the glasses, see what's going on, he suddenly, you know, spouting out one-liners like it's nothing. I mean, he's throwing out one-liners, he's killing aliens. You got gun shootouts, you got portals opening up, explosions. The second half of the movie is balls to the wall action, but it works because the first half really takes its time to set it up. So you got so many classic one-liners in the movie. You got a great performance by Roddy Piper, a great performance by Keith David, Meg Foster, who has those eyes that kind of like, you're like, oh my God, like I don't know if I can trust her or not because those eyes just seem deceptive for some reason. I just think it's a great Carpenter movie. It's not quite horror. It's kind of in that Big Trouble in Little China thing where it's more sci-fi, action, I would say, political, but you'll have a great time with They Live. I have that on 4K, so that's another movie that rewatchability-wise I can watch every couple years and have a great time with. All right, now we're getting to the top three, and number three is probably the first big surprise on the list that I have it this high because I've seen other people rank Carpenter's films, and generally this film is in the top 6 to 7, but it doesn't really get into the top 5 usually. But for me, it's hard not to almost rank this number one, and I'm talking about In the Mouth of Madness. So this is a film from 1995. This is probably for what many consider to be the last great Carpenter film. People do feel like there's a slow descent beginning with Vampires and Village of the Damned, but In the Mouth of Madness is a Carpenter classic. Carpenter apparently a huge Lovecraft fan, and there's a whole subgenre called Lovecraftian horror, which I can't say that I've really put my pulse on or researched exactly what that is and what that means because I actually haven't read any of Lovecraftian's work. But maybe I need to because whatever it is, I'm loving it here in The Mouth of Madness. I love the sort of iconic filmography, that the cinematography, the creepiness of this movie. Of course, this is all about author Sutter Kane's descent into madness. He's writing a book, which is the movie that we're watching, playing out. And I don't know, I get a huge kick out of this movie. Every time I watch it, I learn something new. There's so many things in the background, so many story things to pick up. Carpenter's like really wheeling and dealing. I mean, he's cooking with this movie for sure. You need at least 2 or 3 rewatches of In the Mouth of Madness, I think, to fully get everything that's presenting to you. Speaking of that, Sutter Kane, they're actually coming out with a Sutter Kane novel. It's going to be actually available in stores. So I'm definitely getting that. I'll be reading Sutter Kane this Halloween. Man, this is coming out in 4K also in October, so I can't wait for that. In the Mouth of Madness, I think, is an underrated Carpenter film. Underrated horror film in general. Not everybody has seen it. You can just ask someone in the line, have you read Sutter Kane? If you see familiarity on their face, if they're like, yeah, absolutely. Or if they're just like, what the hell are you talking about? They don't get it. They haven't seen it. But it's a movie that deserves to be considered one of the best horror films of the 1990s. I think this and Candyman and the original Scream, I think that might be my top 3 of horror films in the 90s, but I'd have to kind of rank that out. But it's right here, number 3 for me. I understand for some people it's a very esoteric movie. It's a very specific film. So it for a lot of people, it's just not as fun as some of his other films, so it's not going to rank in their top 5. But for me, I give all props to In the Mouth of Madness. All right, now the top 2 in Carpenter's films list always are the same top 2, I feel like, for most people. So it's all about how you rank these two. And I would say there's definitely one that's ranked number one more often, but it's always these two films. So I may surprise people with my ranking here. My number two is actually the original Halloween. Now, of course, this channel slants heavily on horror. We talk about the Halloween franchise a lot. I always give mad respect. The original Halloween is one of my favorite horror films of all time. I've seen it probably 75 times. I've dissected the original Halloween as much as a film can be dissected. I feel like it's a great, great classic horror film, one of the granddaddies of the slasher genre. You can't say enough good things about the original Halloween, and Carpenter's really, with a low budget, showing his skill level. He's getting the most out of the budget. Sometimes a low budget can inspire creativity because then you have to find an interesting way to get the shot that normally we just throw money at and get the shot that way. So sometimes it fosters creativity for filmmakers, and you can see that here. I mean, Carpenter with a $300,000 budget is really putting everything, all his skill, on screen. I feel like in this film, like whatever he has to work with, having Michael in the shadows, in the background, all the tricks of the trade, the point of view shot, the steady cam in the beginning. This is a master horror director at work. So horror-wise, purely as a horror film, this might be Carpenter's magnum opus, but it's not his best film overall because that has to go to our number one, which is The Thing from 1982. Who can believe one of the biggest things in horror history, sci-fi history, is The Thing came out in 1982 and was slammed by critics and bombed at the box office. Like, people were not rocking with The Thing back in the day. Now, I haven't gone back and read critics' reviews back from 1982, so I don't know how you can actually watch this film like with a straight face and come away feeling like it's a bad film. I know films are subjective. I know that, one man's favorite movie is another man's trash and vice versa, but it's so hard for me to believe that consensusly amongst critics in 1982, they all came out the theater being like, "Whoa, damn, Carpenter messed that up. That was a bad film." Like, man, everything you want in sort of a horror suspense film is here. You have a tremendous amount of atmosphere, paranoia, special effects, amazing practical effects. I mean, the Thing monster looks incredible. Those effects still hold up to this day. You have solid performances again from Kurt Russell, of course, from Keith David. The whole cast is just on point here. The setting is unique. You have the unique sort of Antarctica winter type setting. And I don't know. I think this movie has grown in popularity each decade. It feels like it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I never remembered back in like the 90s or 2000s, I remember people talking about this being better than the original Alien. But now if you go online, it's actually a legitimate discussion. A lot of people will rank this above Alien. And I think they're very interestingly similar films. But I probably I'd probably have to rank The Thing better for me subjectively, but a lot of people have Alien above that. But there's never discussion back then. It just shows how popular The Thing has gotten. And some of that is that ending too. That ending about McGreedy and Childs at the end sitting together. We as an audience not knowing who is The Thing. They say that, well, Childs, you don't see his air, you don't see his breath in the cold, so that must mean he's a thing, or that McGreedy is like has a poison in the bottle, so he drinks the poison or hands it to Childs first to drink it to see how he reacts. No reaction, so he knows it's a thing. There's so many theories about who's a thing at the end, and Carpenter just won't tell us a definitive answer. So it's up to the audience. It'll always be up to the audience's interpretation of that. Do I have a theory on that? Not really. I think probably neither of them are The Thing. Unfortunately, we didn't get a sequel to really elaborate on that, but that ending is so good. It just leaves a mark on the viewer. The Thing is probably in the top 5 sci-fi films of all time. I've never really bought it so much as a horror film the way a lot of people do. I put it more in the sci-fi camp. I don't think that... I understand if you want to put in the horror category, but I've always seen it more as a suspenseful sci-fi film. But I think it's Carpenter's best overall film, and that is a must-watch if you haven't watched The Thing. So those are my top 5 Carpenter films. Again, The Thing, Halloween, In the Mouth of Madness, They Live, Big Trouble in Little China. Again, if you haven't marathon Carpenter films, make that a day. Get some popcorn. Get whatever your food of choice is, whatever your cheese product of choice is. Get some Diet Slice, because Diet Slice is always a W. And watch some of these movies. Of course, you've all seen the original Halloween. I'm sure you've all seen The Thing. But not everybody's seen The Mouth of Madness. they live. I mean, come on, you're gonna have so much fun with that. And Big Trouble in Little China is a great way to end the day. So those are my top 5 Carpenter films. In the comments, if you want to give your top 5 Carpenter films, please do so. What are your favorite Carpenter films? And of course, if you enjoyed this video, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the thumbs up. We're heading into October, so I will tell you guys that October is going to be all Halloween franchise videos. So I'm going to be doing new deep dives into the Thorn trilogy, the Blumhouse trilogy. Going to have a video comparing Loomis versus Laurie. So it's that time of the year. I mean, this channel, had a lot of growth just focusing on Halloween last Halloween. And I feel like it's a time of the year to really dive in the franchise and get all our Halloween thoughts out there. So join me on that journey in October. And until next time, you guys take care.